detection should you install in a rented property? And are all rented properties treated the same? Do landlords even know what they should do? That's what we're diving into in this video, including breaking down the grading systems in BS 5839-6. And we're going to explain LD1, LD2 and LD3 and if they apply to rental properties. And we're going to walk through the different types of rented property and show how the minimum requirements change depending on who the landlord is and how the building is used. But before we look at all of that, we need to clear up how domestic fire detection is defined. And I did use the word domestic there, and that is an important distinction as we're going to find out. Okay, so fire detection in dwellings is set out under BS 5839-6. We also have Part B of the building regulations, which is broken up into two volumes. Volume 2 is concerned with buildings other than dwellings, and Volume 1 is concerned with, you guessed it, dwellings. So what is a dwelling? Well, according to Part B, a dwelling is defined as a single unit of residential accommodation intended to be occupied by one household. That household lives together as a domestic unit and shares the facilities within the accommodation. The dwelling has its own entrance, its own internal layout, and its own means of escape. In practical terms, a dwelling is a house, a flat, an apartment, but somewhere that's used as one home. It doesn't matter if the occupier owns it or rents it. What matters is that it's occupied as a single household. It assumes that the occupants know where the exits are. It assumes that the occupants are asleep, are awake, and moving around a space that the occupants recognise as their home. Those assumptions directly influence fire detection in Part B, Volume 1. Once those assumptions are no longer true, the building may look like a house or a flat, but it may no longer be behaving like a dwelling in fire safety terms. Take a property which has a shop on the ground and a flat above. Is it a dwelling or isn't it? This is why properties such as HMOs, some student accommodation, and certain managed or supported housing can fall outside the simple dwelling model, even though they appear domestic. Okay, so let's get into this, starting with grade and life protection, as these do fall across both volumes of Part B, and we're going to start with grades. The grade tells you how a system is powered and how it operates as a system. The grading does not tell you where the detectors are installed. It only defines the system architecture. Grade A is a full fire alarm system with a control and indicating panel, manual call point and separate detectors. Grade C uses detectors and sounders powered from a central power supply, but without a full control panel. Grade D1 uses mains powered alarm with a sealed tamper-proof battery. Grade D2 uses mains powered alarms with a replaceable battery backup. Grade F1 uses battery powered alarms with a tamper-proof long life battery. Grade F2 uses battery powered alarms with a user replaceable battery. Okay, so on to LD categories. These define the coverage of detection within a property. LD3 is the most basic level of life detection. Detection is provided only in the circulation spaces that form the escape routes, such as hallways and landings. LD2 provides detection in escape routes and in rooms that present a higher risk of fire starting. This normally includes the kitchen and may include living rooms or other higher risk spaces depending on the layout and use of the property. LD1 is the highest level of protection. Detection is provided in most rooms and spaces within the dwelling, excluding bathrooms and low risk areas. Okay, so that's grades and LD categories covered. The next question is whether the same fire detection approach applies to every rented property. The simple answer is no. The legal and technical expectation changes depending on how the property is used, who occupies it, and how it's managed. This is where the distinction between a domestic dwelling and other types of accommodation becomes important. Okay, so let's dive into some common rental property types and see what landlords are responsible for when it comes to fire detection. Housing associations, social housing providers, councils and local authorities are some of the names given to organisations that provide housing services. The properties within social housing stock can vary widely, but the starting point for the detection is often clearer than it is for other landlord types. This is because social housing providers tend to work to documented standards rather than relying on the absolute legal minimum. Housing associations are also responsible for many different property types and uses. Community centres, warden controlled properties, flats, apartments, emergency housing, just to name a few. They have an increased duty of care as they are often housing vulnerable occupants and managing large numbers of properties. For that reason, fire detection in social housing is commonly aligned with lots of different legislation depending on that property type and use. It's a little bit too much for this video, but if you would like me to dive into more detail on the Regulatory Reform Order or the Fire Act and the changes in legislation following the Grenfell tragedy, then let me know in the comments. Student accommodation is often treated as one category, but from a fire detection point of view, it needs to be split into two very different types. The first is purpose-built student accommodation, such as university halls of residence. The second is converted residential property, typically houses or flats let to groups of students. Although both are described as student accommodation, they sit very differently in legislation and fire safety guidance. Purpose-built student accommodation is usually centrally typically managed by a university or a specialist accommodation provider. These buildings are not treated as simple domestic dwellings. They are designed, constructed and managed as higher risk residential buildings with shared facilities, communal escape routes and a large number of occupants who may not be familiar with the building. Fire safety in these buildings is driven primarily by the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order. Under the Fire Safety Order, the responsible person has a duty to assess the fire risk and put appropriate fire precautions in place. That includes fire detection and alarm systems suitable for the size, layout and use of the building. In practice, this means purpose-built student accommodation is usually protected by a full fire alarm system designed to BS 5839-1 rather than the domestic fire detection systems under BS 5839-6. For electricians, the key point here is that this is not a domestic fire job, even though people live here. Converted student accommodation is when things can become less clear. This is typically an ordinary house or flat that has been adapted and let to multiple students who are not from the same household. From a fire safety perspective, those properties often meet the definition of a house in multiple occupation. HMOs are defined under the Housing Act, and many student houses fall into this category because occupants share facilities such as kitchens or bathrooms. Once a property is classed as a HMO, additional fire safety duties apply. Local authority licensing conditions often specify minimum fire detection standards, and these can exceed the basic domestic requirements. In addition, the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order applies to the common parts of the HMO, such as shared corridors and stairways. And it's this which creates an overlap between the fire detection in the domestic living accommodation and non-domestic fire detection required in the shared areas. So can you install these interlinked detectors from FireAngel everywhere in a HMO? To answer it properly, we need to follow how the electrician's guide approaches HMOs, because HMOs can be split into two parts: the individual letting accommodation and the communal areas. Those two areas serve different purposes, are used differently and are therefore treated differently when it comes to fire detection. The individual letting accommodation might be a bedsit, a single room with or without cooking facilities, or a letting unit made up of 2 or more rooms. Although these sit within a larger shared building, the fire detection inside these units is still based on domestic principles. For these areas, the guide points towards a grade D1 system. That means mains powered alarms with a sealed, tamper-resistant backup battery installed to provide reliable warning within the space that the occupant lives and sleeps in. The level of coverage then depends on what the letting unit contains. Whether the unit is a single room bedsit, whether it includes cooking facilities or not, the guide indicates LD1 coverage. That reflects the fact that all of the risk is contained in one smaller space, and the aim is to give the earliest possible warning to the occupants. Where the letting unit is made up of 2 or more rooms, then the guide moves to LD2 coverage. In that situation, detection is focused on the internal escape routes within the unit and on the higher risk room, which is typically the kitchen. In practical terms, this is where interlinked grade D1 alarms are entirely appropriate. The approach changes once you step outside the letting unit and into the communal areas of the HMO. These are the shared corridors, stairways, landings and any shared kitchens or lounges that serve multiple occupants from different households. For communal areas of a HMO, it does not continue with a domestic grade. It moves to a grade A system with LD2 coverage and detector sighting aligned with BS 5839-1 category L2 approach. It reflects the fact that the communal areas are shared escape routes and fall under different fire safety duties. A grade A system has a centrally controlled panel and designed to protect those shared spaces properly. And the FireAngel detectors, which can be interlinked together via a hardwire, an RF link, or a combination of the two, making them a hybrid system, more on that in the next video, can communicate with the central control panel via the FireAngel relay. The no volt relay will activate when the alarm sounds, which tells the fire panel a fire event has occurred and will activate the entire system. Whether the two systems need to interact is a separate design decision that may need to be explored prior to installation. Okay, so what is actually required for fire detection in a rented property? For private rented homes, fire safety is influenced by key pieces of legislation and guidance. The smoke and carbon monoxide alarms regulation sets out the specific duties for landlords around smoke and CO alarms. The Housing Act places a general duty on landlords to keep their properties safe and free from serious hazards, including fire. The Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order can apply to parts of the building containing flats, particularly common parts. And approved document B, volume 1 of the building regulations sets out the life safety expectations for dwellings. On top of all of that, BS 5839-6 provides the technical details for how fire detection systems should be designed and installed. This is why it can sometimes be confusing as to what is required when it comes to fire safety in rental properties. So I've put together some do's and don'ts to help you out when installing fire detection in private rental properties. But remember, if you're not sure, always reference back to legislation, guidance and the manufacturer's instructions. We do install at least one smoke detector on every level that's used as living accommodation. We do install smoke detectors in circulation spaces such as hallways and landings that form part of the escape route in line with building regulations. We do install carbon monoxide alarms in rooms used as living accommodations where there are solid fuel appliances and fixed combustion appliances. We do install that alarms are in full working order at the start of every tenancy. We do recommend that mains powered alarms with battery backup are interlinked as an entire system, as this aligns with the intent of approved document part B and BS 5839-6. We do not treat standalone battery alarms as best practice, even if they do meet the absolute minimum standard. We do document what has been installed, where it's been installed and what guidance has been followed. And we do not assume that two properties with the same layout automatically need the same solution. This quaint little property in North Yorkshire with its resident ducts has a problem. It's a rental, it's old, and the landlord, like lots of landlords, wants to spend the least amount of cash on maintenance. That is no excuse, by the way. Anyway, the start of the tenancy and the detectors installed are far from ideal. They are also battery only, so what we would identify as a grade F1. We have installed these grade F1 detectors from FireAngel, and we've done that for a few reasons. Firstly, they look good. Not the main reason, but a sexy detector in my book goes a long way. Next is they've got great technology built in, including this thermostat technology, which is only found in FireAngel detectors. What I like is for this battery only solution, they can be interlinked using the smart RF modules. So we can create a fully interlinked system, and it's as easy as screwing the detectors in position and programming them together. For CO detection, we are using the FireAngel digital display carbon monoxide alarm. Not only does it have the latest sensing technology, clear LCD displays, temperature and lights up if CO levels begin to rise, but it won a Which Best Buy for carbon monoxide detectors in 2024. FireAngel do have CO detectors that will interlink with the detectors as well to create a complete fire safety solution for this rental, including an app and gateway which will actively monitor the state of the system, which can be beneficial for landlords and tenants alike. So FireAngel offer a complete solution and they look good. In the next video, we're diving into extensions, alterations and fire detection and what you should do to remain compliant under building control if you want to add a little bit of space. Click the video on screen now.